Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we're going to be looking at Bahnsen Knights, and if I'm pronouncing that wrong, please let me know. This game takes place in the late 1980s. It's in the same world as Varney Lake and Mothmen 1966. This one feels a little bit different than those two games just because there's only one perspective, you're not jumping around to different characters, and I think this is actually the weakest part of the entire trilogy. Bahnsen Knights is the most straightforward of the three games. It's about a religious cult, and it's led by a crazy person. The game has some parallel to real world religious cults, which is pretty awesome to see. I like it when games take like actual historical events and use those in their stories, or they take a historical event and kind of put their own spin on it, or something along those lines. There's only one perspective in this game. It differs pretty greatly from the others in that aspect, but I don't think this game would really work if you had more than one perspective, just because of how the entire story is done. The story follows Boulder, which is not his real name. We never really find out what his real name is. He works for some unnamed government agency, and he's trying to find evidence on the Bahnsen Knights for their different criminal activity that's been going on. Specifically, he's trying to link their leader, Tony, to whatever is happening. It's also heavily implied that Tony knows that Boulder is a traitor, that he's not who he says he is, specifically because Boulder just kind of shows up right after they kill off Boulder's partner, who was also trying to infiltrate the Knights. There are a few characters in the game, but we don't really learn too much about them. We've got Boulder, his partner Kupra, who's been dead the entire time. We only find out about him through Boulder. Then we have Kevin, who's a friendly bartender. And then there's Lou, the writer that is in all of these games. It's kind of mentioned that he was asked to write a story about the Bahnsen Knights by Tony, and then Tony freaked out when Lou said, yeah, there's not really a story for me here because there's nothing supernatural going on. And Lou's a paranormal investigator, so yeah, it's odd, to say the least. Tony is our big bad guy. He's a cult leader. And then we have Vincent, Luca, Keith, and Monica. Those are kind of the henchmen for Tony. They're all insane in different ways, sociopaths and other things. They spend most of the game threatening Boulder or giving him little hints into their lives. Monica is the only one that I really wanted to know more about her, because she's kind of Tony's right-hand man. She's very quiet, she doesn't talk a whole lot, and she can fly a helicopter. That's pretty much all I really know about Monica, but wanted to find out more. Boulder really is the main character for all this. The others are just sort of there, and they're not really fully explored in this game because they aren't as important to the plot as Boulder and Tony are. The only connection with the other two games is the introduction of Lou. I believe the goat man, whose name escapes me right now, is in the game. You see him vaguely in the bar scene, but you don't really talk to him, and I don't see him interact with anybody. With how front and center Lou is in the other games, it was kind of strange that he only really played a minor role here. So the general breakdown of this is Tony leads a religious cult in this sort of area of the United States. We're not really sure where, but it's somewhere in like Tornado Alley, which is an area that has got an awful lot of tornadoes going through it every so often. So yeah, that's pretty cool to see that. They don't really nail it down with an exact location, which is nice. This area of the United States that they're in seems to just be perpetually having F5 tornadoes, which are the strongest tornado that you can have, I think. And yeah, it's kind of crazy where it's just like, yeah, there's another tornado coming up. We need to go do this. It's like a thing that these poor people just deal with constantly. The story's pretty okay. Uh, I like the other two more just because the supernatural aspects are just completely gone or almost entirely gone from this game. There are a lot of characters who could be really interesting in here, but they're not really developed in any way. It is a fun game to go through just because you get a lot of talk with Boulder, and he talks an awful lot about his life and what he's going through being an undercover officer. It's pretty fun. It's not going to take you too long, and yeah, it's a pretty great story. The gameplay is fine for a point-and-click adventure game or a visual novel. You're watching a story unfold here, and you do have some control over the dialogue. At some points in the game, you can play little mini-games or solve simple puzzles in order to advance the game. This is not really a hard game at all. You've got plenty of chances to get the right answer, so you can just trial and error through this thing and beat it in like 2.5 hours. The puzzles in the minigames are okay. Many of them are just simple quick-time events, and the puzzles where you just sort of avoid obstacles, those are okay too. It isn't anything amazing, and most of what you're doing is just selecting different dialogue options in order to control what's happening. You have some control over how much of the story you can see. You can choose who you talk to or who you ignore, and really what you want to say to people, to some extent. It was mostly trial and error for me, but the solutions for a lot of these puzzles came pretty quick. The only time it was really a huge problem for me was with the really stupid helicopter thing at the end of the game, where you're given the clue, I believe it's dirt, forest, water, and you need to jump out of the plane or jump out of the helicopter when it's on water. The little screen that you'll see will change colors to let you know, okay, now it's dirt, now it's forest, now it's water. And you just have to time it right. And if you don't really know what you're looking for at first, it might take you a couple of tries. Like, I kept on mistiming it and ended up killing Boulder probably like 7 or 8 times before I got it right. It is a little annoying, but you can pretty much do it. Like other games in the series, there is a little card game or a solitaire game that you can play. This one is okay. I feel like it's really overly complicated, and there's a lot of stuff in it that just didn't need to be there. I don't know, it just felt really... It didn't feel really straightforward like the other two. So, yeah, it could be fun, but I did not necessarily like it. There is this odd thing with the game. There is this 7-bar trust meter, and I guess it can impact how people talk to you or how people see you. If you fill up the bar, they're going to be less trusting and you won't be able to read them all that well. They'll be more unpredictable. And if you get the bar empty, then you'll be able to kind of gain their trust or something like that. I like the idea, but I didn't really care all that much about it. I could see how it would change the story in some places, but for the most part, it just didn't really impact the game that much. I didn't really see a huge impact with it. It just was there, and then I beat the game and forgot that the little trust meter existed. It was strange. I do like the gameplay in these games, but that's just because I like the different mini games you can go through. And some of them are fun. Others are kind of like, okay, well, that's great. I'm glad that's there, but I don't really care about it. I liked the mini games in both Mothman 1966 and Varney Lake more than this one. This game has a very similar graphic style to the previous two games, but it uses a different color palette. Bahnsen Knights uses more reds, pinks, and purples, and that really helps any other color stand out. So when you do get some blue in there, it really, really pops on the screen. It looks really cool. Of the three games, I like this one the best from a graphic standpoint. I think this is the most stylish looking of the three games. I love the colors that they used here. The images look fantastic. It didn't look as creepy early on as some of the imagery from the other two games, but that really ramped up as Tony kind of just descends into madness and you have Boulder dealing with some more heavy stuff. It's really cool. Once you get into just the different characters in this that are kind of more sociopaths, their imagery looks really creepy and menacing. And having this color palette really makes that stand out. It looks so cool. And it really looks awesome when the images start kind of strobing a little bit. It makes things just creepy as all hell. You also get to see Tony's really just maniacal look, like he's totally unhinged at the end of this game. It's amazing. The only moment in this game where I think the graphics really impacted the gameplay was on the final puzzle when you're in the helicopter. I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about the gameplay, but man, this one was really messing with me. You have to jump out of the helicopter and land in a lake. You're given the hint, forest dirt water, so I got it wrong the last time I mentioned it. And you need to land in the water, and you need to time everything right. Thankfully, you have unlimited continues because Jesus Christ was this annoying. So the screen will flash on those different images, and it kind of makes sense the way you look at it. You get sort of the light blue that's supposed to be the lake, then you get a kind of a brownish color that I think is supposed to be the dirt, and then you can see the trees pretty well on that one once it switches to that image. But God, timing it right was just really annoying. And now that I know what to do, I could probably do it in my first or second try, but man, it took a lot to get it once I was on this first playthrough. I love the graphics in this game, though. Even with weird stuff at the end, I think the images look really creepy as Tony goes crazier and crazier. And yeah, it's really awesome when you go through this because everything really matches Boulder's mood throughout the game. So I really liked Bahnsen Knights. It isn't as good as the previous two. I still think Varney Lake is the best out of the three. I think Bahnsen Knights looks the best. I like their graphic style. I do like some of the puzzles better, but I don't think the story is as good as Varney Lake. This was an odd one for me to really go through. In some ways, I feel like it's better than the other two games, but it lacks some of the things that I kind of liked from Mothmen 1966 and Varney Lake. This one really doesn't have the supernatural stuff in it. There's really only like one or 2 points where I'm like, oh, okay, it is existing in the same world as the other two games. It's just kind of odd from that standpoint. Also, it only has one point of view, and that works for the story that they're telling, but it feels a little disconnected from the other two games in that way, where you had a group of characters going through something, and here it's really just Boulder's perspective on everything. I think this is the third best game in the trilogy. It's still a very good game, but I think it's probably the weakest of the three. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.